Hello everyone, nice to see you watching my next video. Today, it's all about our most used drug, which is not that bad as many people think. We will take a look on caffeine. Caffeine is a miracle drug, but 90% of people use it wrong. The results? Heart issues, anxiety, and addiction. Here's how to use caffeine correctly to avoid health issues and gain all the benefits, everything backed by science. Let's do this. Andrew Huberman has studied the human brain for 20 plus years. Here's a video of him explaining exactly what caffeine does to your body and brain. After watching, stay with me for the breakdown.
So what's caffeine doing? Caffeine is causing the liberation of adrenaline from your adrenals, these two little marble-sized glands above your kidneys. That tends to activate the so-called sympathetic nervous system, make you a little bit more prone to move, bring some alertness to your body. Simultaneously, it's causing the release of norepinephrine and epinephrine from this little cluster of neurons called locus coeruleus that we talked about before. So the brain is being hosed with a little bit of epinephrine as we speak right now. In addition, it's triggering a dopamine increase, but not by triggering the release of dopamine directly. Caffeine increases the sensitivity of dopamine receptors. So whatever dopamine is floating around in your system and my system, the caffeine is amplifying that effect. Not necessarily by making it a longer effect, by making the intensity a little bit higher. The other thing that caffeine does, and this is perhaps the most important one, is that it effectively prevents the action of a molecule called adenosine. Adenosine is a molecule that builds up the longer that you are awake. And then when you sleep, adenosine gets pushed back down to a minimal level. Adenosine essentially is a readout of fatigue overall. So if we were to stay up for 2 days, adenosine levels would be very high. So in terms of a practical tool, I do try and restrict my caffeine intake, or at least most of it, to the early part of the day. I'll stop drinking caffeine usually around 3 or 4 p.m. I don't drink any high amount of caffeine after 4 p.m. and generally not coffee. But when you wake up in the morning, depending on how well and how long you slept, your levels of adenosine might be zeroed out and you feel really alert, or you might have a small amount of adenosine hanging around. If you drink caffeine right away, let's just keep it simple. It essentially binds to the receptor that adenosine would normally occupy.
It's an antagonist.
It's an antagonist, but it's what we call a competitive agonist because it binds, so it's an agonist, but it outcompetes the adenosine, so the adenosine can't dock at those receptors. So that's great because you start to wake up. But then around 2 or 3 p.m., as that caffeine wears off, the adenosine that's still around binds to those receptors and you get the afternoon crash. So one way that you can avoid the afternoon crash, or at least offset quite a bit of it, is to wait 90 to 120 minutes after you wake up to ingest any caffeine. Adenosine will continue to be cleared from your system in the early part of the day.
First of all, improved focus and alertness. Caffeine is well known for helping people feel more awake, focused, alert. It works by blocking adenosine, a chemical that makes you feel sleepy. But I bet you've never heard about the next benefits. Second, improved physical performance. This is accomplished by increasing endurance during exercise. Caffeine prepares the body for intense physical activity. How? By stimulating the release of adrenaline. Third, caffeine benefits from Andrew Huberman. Andrew mentions 4 key benefits. It acts as a reinforcing agent. It improves our ability to think. It blocks adenosine, the hormone that makes us feel sleepy. The last one will leave you jaw-dropped.
So there are 4 ways that caffeine works that we need to understand. First of all, caffeine acts as a reinforcing agent. It increases the probability that you will return to and engage in a certain activity or consume a certain beverage or food. Second of all, caffeine increases dopamine and acetylcholine, which are both neuromodulators in the forebrain, which helps us improve our ability to think. And third, it increases the number and efficacy of dopamine receptors in the reward pathways of the brain. That is, it makes things that would feel pretty good feel even better. And fourth, caffeine acts as an antagonist to adenosine, which offsets the sleepiness that we would otherwise feel from the accumulation of adenosine that occurs as we are awake for more and more hours throughout the day.
Fourth, helps with hair loss. Caffeine can fight hair loss in 2 ways. By drinking it, by applying caffeine ointment to your scalp. Andrew suggests not using the ointment daily. Consult with your doctor first.
Caffeine does many things besides stimulate our central nervous system and make us feel less sleepy, however. By ingesting caffeine or by applying topical caffeine ointment or cream to the scalp and increase some hair growth, or at least maintain hair growth in that region. Keep in mind that topical caffeine ointments shouldn't necessarily be applied every single day. So this is the sort of thing you might do 3 times a week. And also, no, you can't simply just drink more caffeine in order to accomplish the goal of offsetting hair loss.
A lot of people say they don't feel the same energy they used to when drinking coffee. Andrew explains why, and he has a solution for it. Pay attention to his video.
A lot of people fall into this category. They drink caffeine every day. They're no longer getting the performance-enhancing effect of caffeine, so they're taking it just to be normal or feel like they can focus normally and have normal amounts of energy. But then if they try and come off, they feel worse. First of all, just have your amount of caffeine intake for 2 or 3 days. Probably easiest to do by volume. And so instead of drinking an 8-ounce coffee in the morning, maybe you do 4 ounces of regular coffee, 4 ounces of decaf, or you just have the 4 ounces of coffee. You do that for 3 or 4 days, and then you take perhaps 1 full day off from caffeine, maybe another full day off, and then you go back to ingesting caffeine, but you go back to ingesting caffeine at that 50% dose, or what used to represent that 50% dose of caffeine for you.
Finally, here's how to use caffeine properly to avoid those afternoon crashes. Drink your caffeine 120 minutes after waking up. Drinking coffee first thing in the morning is the reason for those crashes. Here's how to fix it.
Doesn't caffeine just make you feel like you're not tired?
So this is a really cool mechanism. There's actually a trick to avoid the afternoon crash. It's not a trick, it's biology. But caffeine is an adenosine antagonist. It basically, as the longer you're awake, adenosine builds up in your bloodstream. It's what makes you feel fatigued. Caffeine essentially blocks the adenosine receptor, but then when caffeine wears off, the adenosine that's still around binds to that receptor and you crash. You feel really sleepy. So one thing that you can do is when you wake up in the morning, don't ingest caffeine for the first 90 minutes or so. Like really push that off so that the adenosine and adenosine receptor interactions can all take place and dissipate. Then you drink caffeine, and what you'll find is that if normally you would crash around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, you don't experience that crash anymore.
Mainly, guys, please, if you are drinking coffee, stay hydrated as much as you need. It's really important. And do you also know what's next important thing? Leave a subscribe and like here. Also some comments so I can read something at night. And as I always saying, peace and live a long life.